Okay, welcome to Shadow Tech Alchemy. I'm Colin Davis, and today I have with me the Canadian animation artist Lubomir Arsov. And it's probable that some of the viewers of this show will have already seen some of his work because he has a very highly viewed short film called In Shadow, which came out in 2017. And I can't think of any other film or really piece of art that I think as deeply and holistically goes into the nature of the decline of our civilization, as well as his film In Shadow does. And Melissa and I found him, or we saw his film probably in 2018. And then we contacted him because we wanted to see if we could use some of it for some of our own. We were doing a live performance piece called the O1 Experience, and he let us use it for the projection in the background. And so we've been talking ever since. And I'm going to put the link to the movie, to the film, below in the description for anybody that hasn't seen it. And I would just say, just absolutely, you must watch that film. So today we're going to talk. We've talked about having an interview, and it's just never happened, and so now it's happening. And thank you for being with me today, Lubomir.
Thank you, Colin. It's a pleasure to be here with you and to speak in this more somewhat curated way, which I enjoy.
Yeah. So I'm glad we're finally doing it. And we talked before we started recording about what we were going to maybe talk about. But I think we should, before we even go into your background, maybe we should just introduce our viewers to your film In Shadow. I know you've kind of moved on. You've also put out The Forest King, and you have a new one called Kingdom coming out now. But maybe you can just kind of go back to the days when you put out the film and talk about what was in what were you trying to accomplish, and whether you thought you did accomplish it, and maybe just talk in any way you want to about the film In Shadow.
Mm-hmm. So for those who have not seen it, it's an animated short film about 13 minutes long, and it's an audiovisual experience. That's probably a dry and accurate way to describe it. I saw it as a personal form of expression in that I work in animation, and I have worked for animation for about 15 years. So there's a lot of structured service work and working and helping to develop and create TV series and movies. So I've serviced different functions within that field. And within traditional storytelling, within Shadow, as I was going through my own revelation of world forces and mechanics behind world events, collective psychic forces, eruptions and disruptions, etc.
Red pill kind of awakening type stuff.
Red pill kind of stuff. I love the term parapolitical. To describe some of this stuff. Of course, we know this ties into, of course, with the kind of conspiratorial, paranoid thinking, if we want to be a little cheeky about it. But of course, that term now can be pattern matched with with just a silly kind of interpretation of what it means to look beyond manufactured reality, right? It's like
Right.
Anyway,
right.
so that's just
these are paranoid conspiracy theorists that are looking for a simplified way of describing the world, right?
Yeah, so that framing is it's a funny one, but it is a very basic yet effective magic spell used by Empire, or just it's a self-created one,
gaslighting technique, really, right?
Yeah, and I could even argue that it is a self-created one by the collective to protect themselves from the discomfort of collapsing their reality. So whatever it is a barrier to truth.
You're right. It actually is kind of a conspiracy between the public who doesn't want to face the collective shadow and the parasites who do want to continue parasiting.
Yeah, it's isn't it always though? That dance it's a funny one. And it's funny, we're getting into these things. I'll pop back into In Shadow.
Yeah, okay, we're already getting pretty deep. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but I will just get back into In Shadow. Yep. So in order to illustrate the thoughts, feelings, and experiences I was having in unearthing this new reality for myself, I was also developing the skills adequate to tell stories, and I had not told a story of my own yet since I left animation school, and there were just very sophomoric things that I was doing there. But now with this newfound skill, I felt a greater desire, more of a calling actually, more than a desire to express the things I was experiencing in a way that I found visuals could express more deeply than my verbal ability or my written skills, which were just as convincing as they are to some of us. Ultimately, to the wider public, they are not. And so, by not using words, by not using concepts, I use the visual language. And while it still is, it's replete and uses a lot of societal cliches, visual cliches, a lot of it does tend to bypass any of the usual filters that people use to, like we were just saying, to dissociate from some of these aspects. And in fact, this is an interesting point that I keep going back to. There's a responsibility in those of us who are interested in truth and not being right or having special esoteric knowledge about how the world works.
Right.
When it's not just the ego construct of I'm the special one because I know the secrets, but it comes from let us all partake in truth, right, and wisdom, etc.
Right.
Then it is our responsibility, if we are communicators like you and I, to find novel ways to be artful with our vernacular. Right. So that means any symbolic vernacular, language, visual language, art, whatever the expression is. And so that's why right now we have within this landscape of, just this false dichotomy of left, right. And of course, there are merits there and other things we can discuss. But overall, to use that phrase again, pattern matching, it's so easy to, each side uses codified words to identify their own team and to attack the other team. And as soon as you hear any of those words used by the other team, that's another spell, right? It's just an auto script that we run. We hear the auto script and we say, no, thank you, revert back to default, right? And so
this is very ancient and human, though. I mean, even animals are doing this, right? Birds can tell the difference between subspecies, they have dialects and all that kind of stuff, right? So this is just very animalistic, really.
Well, we need to in this material realm, we need to be saving cognitive capacity for other vital tasks. So we're creating shorthands for everything, right? So I'm not rediscovering the books in my house and figuring out what they are and how to read, or like that each time seeing this cup of coffee, redefining that it's a cup and what the function is, right? And yet I'm just assuming
all we're using is just preset models. Yes.
Preset models. However, now this is where we have to be wiser, and this is where awareness and attunement to the present moment comes, and attunement to being more and more responsible for the definitions and perceptions that we accept. And this is where it matters for us to really refresh. Every second we're refreshing anew with a charitable view to see what the real expression is of this moment. And as such, then we can start calibrating to express more accurately. So instead of me using certain words that are autoscripts for describing a certain phenomena, political or otherwise, I find new words to actually speak to the human being about what I may find troubling in a situation. And then they can actually hear me. And then we can go beyond the words. So looping back into shadow.
What about instead of using new words, what about also using their language?
Their language, and not just new words. You're right. Just the arrangement of words so that they're not, what we're used to. Right. And so in shadow, in that regard, was my way of using my language and developing a certain kind of absurdist, surreal, accessible, comic booky animation flair.
It's anybody that, I would actually even say, maybe pause this interview and then go watch the film and come back, because it's just in the amount of content that's in there, it's just like one snapshot, one visual snapshot. I guess this is how you kind of put it together. You sketched out each frame. Each frame is like a comic book frame, and with displaying some aspect of the society or the human predicament, and you just put it right there, and then you just go to the next frame, and then you just go to the next frame. And I don't know how many frames you have in the film. There must be many hundreds, and it just takes you it takes you down the rabbit hole and you're just like, wow, these, you can turn on such and such, sort of conspiracy newscast or whatever, and you can hear different people describing different ways, different views of our civilizational darkness. But what you did with the film was you took. I just can't think of any view that's not in there. Everything's in there. And so it's incredibly holistic. It's psychological. It's sociological. It's talking from the systemic level, from the cultural level, from the spiritual level, and they're all just going back and forth. And so when you're done with the film, in my opinion, you're like, wow, okay, yeah, I can't deny this is what we're going through. And then it's a question of what are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's well put. So my intention was to weave all these things together, and those of us who are on a path of unfolding and greater understanding of reality, we also have our mundane lives, which are not exclusive or outside of this experience of reality. Right. Of course, it is actually the grit and the meat of it.
Yeah.
But it also means that we get taken away from a coherent view and a more accurate map of reality that we're building. We get taken away through different tasks, concerns, our own emotional and mental turbulence. And so in those cases, we still maintain some sort of framework of how we think things are at this moment with this map of reality. But it's difficult to kind of piece it all together and get a sense of like, what is this whole thing? And it's not that In Shadow achieves that, but my aim was in a compact space to create such a barrage of it for the viewer that I was able to compact enough of it with enough of signaling that it is part of a greater adventure of something much bigger, that it's very serious and also not serious at all. And packaging that together.
Because it's satirical at the same time. Yeah, right.
And it's also part of this great game of creation of the manifestation of the higher planes into the lower, into matter, in which we're entangled. And like, we're not here forever. That's my supposition.
Right. There's a high level spiritual. Right.
Yeah. And because of that, we're also like, we can zoom out and be like, oh, okay, yeah, thank God I remember. Zoom in and be like, oh, fuck, okay, but I still have to deal with it. There's no escaping, because this is why I'm here. I need to process this emotion. There's actual like substance here that needs to be spiritualized, etc. So with that barrage, the attempt was just to be like, look.
Look. Just look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this. Here you are, here we are. Here's what we're denying. Here's what we're denying.
Yeah. And also, if I may just say, that look, there is a bit of a kind of a troll trickster and thing of like, just fucking look and let's go. Like, let's grab our hands and let's travel together.
Yeah.
But there's no mean, like, look how terrible the world is and isn't it fucked? And another artistic, I actually don't really like that when pieces of art leave you kind of hanging in darkness. And
it doesn't.
No, because it doesn't serve a purpose. And of course, I did this with my other piece, The Forest King. I did leave people in darkness. There are reasons which I can go into.
Yeah.
But when it's just sort of an artistic, not being able to untie the knot of storytelling and sort of leaving it in some like, well, isn't it all terrible? And how how fun. So anyway, it's not out of meanness that I did that. It was with an intention to shake up shadow debris.
But the fact that it's animation, and we could have made the same film by taking news programs or whatever and cutting them up and showing the exact same thing with actual photographs or video. But the fact that you do it with animation sort of gives you a little bit of a protective layer there, so that there's always, okay, I'm watching an animation. It's metaphorical. This isn't the actual. This isn't somebody dying on the street right here. This is a comic version of that, and that kind of protects your ego a little bit.
It totally does. And also the art serves a greater purpose in that you're not allying those images to some specific event or something that you can brush off, but it's more universal, and it goes into more of the territory of mythology, in which you have principles applied broadly, which I think is more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's great, and people who have seen the film or will be able to understand what we're talking about more. So So now, maybe you could also, so you put that out, and I mean that was obviously, artists understand that when you are kind of commanded from your deep self structure that you're going to do something, and you maybe pick it up and put it down, pick it up, put it down, and then it just keeps on coming back. And at some point you go, okay, I have to create this, and I'm going to have to, make this happen. And then you do, and then you. Well, actually, I forgot where I was going to go with that, but you did that, and you crunched, and you told me before that you took off work for a year, and you just crunched it, and you just made it happen, and you put it out, and then you're like, okay, that's relaxed. You went back, you did other things in life, you went back to work and all of that. And then you were doing, you were bouncing around wondering what's next, like what artists always do. You put out The Forest King. I don't know, did The Forest King actually come out, or is it still sitting on the shelf?
It is. Can I just go into that a bit to explain about The Forest King?
Yeah, please.
The Forest King is something that I was commissioned to do. However, I did write and direct it, so it truly is an expression of mine. It is an adaptation of a Goethe ballad, which then went through Russia and then to me in my interpretation of it. So it's part of a 6-episode series of stories based on Eastern European horror folk tales. And this is my rendition. It's a 19-minute film. We've been looking for distribution. The producers are just waiting to put it on Prime Video and Tubi. And it may or may not come out on YouTube in the next year, my episode. I hope it does. It's not up to me.
It needs to come out.
But yeah, it's one more thing I wanted to say. It's a film I'd love for people to see because it's being complete for a year and a half now. I wrote it in 2021, right during the COVID tragic comedy, and so I felt it was just like super appropriate and very. I just really wanted to release it because it has to do with NPC culture and disavowal of personal will in exchange for social rewards. So. Yeah, may that come out soon.
Okay, and then while we're there, maybe touch on what you're working on right now.
So I'm working on a short film called The Kingdom. This is something I did entirely on my own, with no real help from any other artists, which usually I do get assists. And this was something that has to do with basically getting off of our knees. And claiming the sword, raising the sword, anchoring the divine impulse, and being a conduit for that higher knowing, higher presence, and then being a source, a beacon that broadcasts that signal outward for the new vision, right? So,
I see. So some optimism, some white pilling, right?
Some big time white pilling, because we have to will the white pill in front of us in a way, right? It's not dependent on circumstances. It's not dependent on good news. It's dependent on our will to envision something new, powerful, vital, robust, and to enact it through our behavior, through our actions, through our thoughts and emotions. And this is really, truly heroic work. So that I directed some episodes of one of the new He-Man remakes. After working on that and coming up with all kinds of transformations and other things to empower these fictional characters, which, it's a TV show that I didn't write, so it's not, it's just a TV show for kids. It was a good craft experience, but what I got from that was just so much of like, I have the power, just bringing that in. And I've always thought that was so empowering. And so that stayed with me, and I took something that was supposed to be a minute-long video. It's now 14 minutes long. Aubrey Marcus is executive producing it.
Excellent, yeah.
So he's a great ally on that journey, and it will be out soon.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad you're working with him because he will put it out. And well, let me just ask you something then. Okay, so. This white pilling film and this whole idea of, and this is just sort of a classical kind of alchemical kind of situation where, you're red pilled, so to speak. You are initiated, and you're and you know okay, try to put this together here. This is in Alchemy, this is the Negrito, right? You're explaining a civilizational Negrito period in Shadow. And one of the reasons why people want to avoid looking at all the cultural darkness is because they intuit that if I let my ego get access to this darkness within me, it will take me over and it will flood me out and destroy me. And they're actually right. And because when people have the personal equivalent to what you're explaining in that film is the personal Negrito or personal dark night of the soul, and it can either kill you or initiate you. And we know about all the different kinds of people, addicts, people that go through all kinds of midlife crises or other types of crises, and they don't make it out, or they go crazy or whatever. And then there's the people who use it as an initiation and they transform through it. And so the light side is the side where the initiation it starts the alchemical process, and you have to go through all that awakening to darkness and integrating of darkness, of your own darkness, of whatever version of this you incarnated to experience. And then if you show people this light side, absolutely, that's you have to do that. But at the same time, we need to develop the people like us who are aware of what's going on. And, we're not just writing and making films about this alchemical process and then not going through it ourselves personally. We're going through it ourselves personally, and then we're developing tools to get ourselves out of this garbage and to realize our own highest purpose, to get a handle on the destructive forces that live within us, because this is all self-similar. Everything that you're explaining in the film has a personal correlate in the so-called shadows within all of us individually, and it manifests differently according to the person. But this is the conundrum here, is how to go from point A to point B to point C, and there's two ways to go about it. I'll just say this and then let you comment, and that is that you can go through this. Humanity is going through this cyclical alchemy of evolution, and we'll just and we don't even have to be, it's going to happen no matter if we're conscious of it or not. But then there are those cells of the body politic, so to speak, who are conscious of what's going on and who start to interact with the process and feed back with the process and try to stimulate the process and steer the process maybe, or at least contribute to this alchemical awakening process. And how we do that, obviously the art is a great way to do that, but then we also have to have methods that we use in our own personal lives. Because once people get, and this is kind of the work I'm doing, and it's that because once you get red-pilled, you can get black-pilled really easily. But if you want the white pill, if you want the evolution to come out of this, you're going to have to do some hard work yourself. And so there's going to also have to be people that kind of do this and explain how it's done and give examples for how this work is done at the personal level, because we can't just say, hey, this is how bad it is, this is how screwed up it is, and hey, here's what's potentially the light at the other end of the tunnel, but how we get there, who the hell knows, right? So what do you say to that?
Extremely important what you said. It's extremely important, because otherwise we're just we're entertaining ourselves. So of course I completely agree with everything you're saying, in that I am have been going, and will be going through my own unraveling.
Yep.
There is, I can attest to this when I look at people who are showing up publicly and making statements or elucidating concepts or revealing information. I subconsciously confer leadership and authority to them just because they've gotten up and said something, right? And doesn't mean that they know better or have the solutions or that their life is in harmony. But there's something that there's just an assumption in all of
They're
us when someone
courageous,
takes the
right?
lead that they have it figured out. Yeah, they're courageous, and that's like much respect to that. Like,
Yeah.
like you and I in our own ways have done that, to the degrees that we have, and so I just wanted to point that dynamic out, that assumption, we should be careful and vigilant of it.
Oh, that we would project hero onto other people very easily, and then not become heroes ourselves.
Absolutely, or really feel that they have things figured out and follow in whatever footsteps we assume they're taking. So,
Right.
maybe I'll just move away from this. There's some things to be
Project
said
parent
there,
then, or project savior, or project shaman onto these other people, and then let them carry those roles for us.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we find ourselves in an interesting point in time, right? So in the West, you and I are, of course, both great followers of Carl Jung.
Yeah.
You're much more wise and attuned to his knowledge than I am. But he's the kind of
Still
modern,
figuring it out.
yeah, and he's the modern connector between the shamanistic, alchemical, and our earth traditions with our modern understanding of psychotherapy and all of that stuff, and him leading us into that field, and us discovering psychotherapy, which then started merging more with the wisdom traditions of the world,
Right.
your forgotten European traditions, just because our earth folk were wiped out way before many others were by empire. And tying that in with a lot of the modern discoveries, which are absolutely beautiful in the form of somatic therapies. With Peter Levine's work that moved up. Like for me, I'm a great adherent to Alexander Lowen's bioenergetic system, which follows in Wilhelm Reich's steps.
Okay.
Not many people know Alexander Lowen, but he opened my eyes a lot to a lot of the embodiment work that I've started doing, and in the last years has just really taken off. And so collectively, we're figuring out all of the IFS. I know that you
I know about
IFS. Into IFS, and IFS,
yeah, we use it.
And it was just this rediscovery of all these other world systems, and specifically, I love Gurdjieff's work and the Fourth Way and Ouspensky stuff. So, looking at Gurdjieff's work with the magnetic center and the various eyes, and then you have IFS, which manifests that in a much more workable, practical, almost pop psychology way that goes really deep. So, all in all, what I'm saying is we are discovering this collective global heritage of quote unquote healing, which is actually dealing with all the fractured parts, integrating them, getting to know them, elucidating the different pockets of unconsciousness. And now there's a collective understanding that the body actually is one of the best biofeedback instruments through which we tap into, we calibrate and synchronize matter with spirit and the psyche and all those subtle substances, right? For me, I'm not going to go deep into this. For me, it sounds so grand to say, and it's not grand. It's just like the truth of the matter is I was initiated by psilocybin in around 2015 into this embodiment work, because I was already doing a lot of Alexander Lowen stuff. Then I had a few mystical experiences which led me to the direct knowledge that the body is the thing. And I saw how much I truly held in my body, how much of my unconscious was actually the body.
Yeah, the body keeps the score, right?
Yeah, and consequently, I saw that this wave of gnosis, of wisdom, was just moving through our population, and that knowledge just started coming up from everywhere, right? And Gabor Mate was already doing some of that work, and then Body Keeps the Score. I forget the author's name.
Van der Kolk, I think, Dutch.
Van der Kolk.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that point, I was also following Michaela Bohm. She was doing some good work with it, and anyway, we're rediscovering all these modalities to piece ourselves back together. And we're also, as a result, we're also discovering a lot of ways to continue fleeing from that. So we still have spiritual bypassing and a lot of these other ways. But Without going into too many
In other
tangents.
words, how our bodies are internalizing the how that civilization is inherently traumatizing. At least this version of it is inherently traumatizing to human beings, and that then that becomes that's recorded. Like if you talk about in Reich's terminology, in body armoring, which goes all the way down into the cellular structure, and then our sort of traumatic reactive responses to this machine then become integrated into our psychology, into our physiology, and then we're just in this kind of programmatic and reactive kind of PTSD that we don't even know we have. And then when we try to unplug from it, we realize how addicted we are to the chemicals, the adrenaline, the cortisol, and all of that. And then unplugging from that would be also necessitate unplugging from the economy. And then how are we going to survive? And blah blah blah. And so it's this sort of this trauma trap that this is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's within that, like the big thing that I see is we don't yet have a coherent cultural framework for initiation and for growth. We're not oriented toward a target. Right now, the target is to be well adjusted to society as it is with its ruling narratives. So that's why therapies that are very popular right now, like cognitive behavioral therapy, basically adjust you back into being a good worker, just like get back in line and function without going too batshit crazy.
Right.
But of course, we know that things go much deeper than that, and that the impulse here is for spirit to be embodied in matter, so that it can be spiritualized. This is just my understanding and my felt sense of it. And so in that process, in that process, a spirit tries to basically tether itself and awaken matter. It just brings up a lot of things that are quite troubling. And if we don't have the orientation of, let's say, that is the target, that we are here to embody a greater harmonious level of consciousness, whatever it is, that's kind of broad and loose, but at least then we would be oriented in a certain direction. So it would really help for all those people whose shadow does come up and does start going into what seems like madness. If they don't have the framework of something as simple as you need to go through the darkness.
Right.
Once you do so with the high level of fidelity, trust, faith, and support of wiser people who may have gone through at least some of it or beyond it all with you, then there is not only a light beyond at the end of the tunnel, there is actually a brilliant. This
is the key in my view. This exactly what you said there, in that if you could just basically, there's just this basic framework, and I would always go back to what Jung was uncovering and elucidating, but this framework of, okay, this process, I would call it alchemical. This alchemical process goes like this. Your life goes through these different cycles and stages. In each of these, this process is happening. Each of these is its own little hero's journey. Each of these involves, confrontation, with the darkness, with the monsters of the forest, however you want to put it, the demons, however you want to put it, just the challenges. You can put it in as mundane, other, secular words or whatever you want. This is going on. Expect it. When this happens, when you have these crashes, these are the moments when you can acquire wisdom. You should embrace these cyclical down cycles and use each of them to become more evolved and to become more adult, and that the whole process is to become more adult, more developed, a higher functioning, more evolved human being, however you end up doing it. And this is how it goes. And and this is it, and then here's some tools for it. And in the prior age, or let's just say before the Reformation, or before the Renaissance, and then the Reformation, there was the medieval mind, and all of this was actually encoded in the scripture, in the whole spiritual narrative, but it was kind of dumbed down. But at least it was there, and at least all these motifs, if you touched upon them by embedding yourself into this this religious spiritual structure, at least those essential elements of your functioning were at least represented, and you weren't completely lost and just untethered, as you say. And now that the whole modernity has crashed that whole mindset, and for a lot of people, you just can't go back. There's been nothing to replace it. And so I think that's kind of what we're going through right now, is we're going through the process of developing a replacement that I think probably is not going to fully replace the old religious worldview, but it is going to be another layer that goes on top that helps to sort of like a plug-in, we're developing
like an add-on.
An add-on, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally, absolutely, and we're rediscovering a lot of the world traditions. A lot of them we're misunderstanding. Some of them are not appropriate to us Westerners, I don't think, even within just the function of our collective soul and our collective unconscious symbols that we use. Like, is Shipibo ayahuasca shamanism, is that fit for every Westerner? I don't think so.
No.
I've partaken in it and I've benefited. Was it the most optimal thing for me? Maybe not. Did it help? Yes. Some people experience PTSD because of those experiences? Yes. And so within that frame, also within this space, what's exciting is we're rediscovering the perennial tradition, the perennial wisdom, the golden chain, which weaves the one primordial spark of consciousness, the flame, right?
The divine spark.
The divine spark as an actual experiential, like an experience of being that and emanating out of it. And so we're making sense of all these things. And I do feel that the perennial wisdom does ask for an update every generation that is awake enough to be able to systemize it in a way that doesn't go into dogma, but keeps it fresh enough to be adequately suitable for the culture of the moment. And I think we're at that time. The difficulties that we're experiencing is, of course, a lot of people this is not a criticism, this is just an observation, and that many people do make a living now within this space on Instagram and TikTok and other spaces, and by the structure of social media, people have to put out quote unquote content, and so we fragmentize a lot of the earth wisdom, a lot of these wisdom traditions and sound bites, often not even our own.
And the attention spans are so broken that who can actually go read Carl Jung?
Well, that's the difficulty. So this is both a blessing and a curse in some way. A lot of people who would never pick up a book now can actually read a few quotes or a few posts and be somewhat acquainted with, like the holistic psychologist. I think she has millions of followers, and she's helping with her daily posts to help a lot of people understand trauma and how to deal with self-soothing and a lot of practical things. So stuff like that is super useful. And yet, yes, at the same time, even in good intention, people like even in myself, I see that there's sometimes I program myself to be in a more of a shallow level of absorption instead of going into deeper wisdom of putting aside an hour to be with some sort of text of scripture or deep psychology or deep spirituality or some ancient, like reading the Bhagavad Gita or whatever it is, and allowing my body to assimilate that as I percolate and contemplate it. So that's super essential. But I think it's a fascinating time because we are at our fingertips, we do have the perennial traditions. At the same time, many of us are not mature enough to know what to do with it, and a lot of people are fumbling with it. And so we'll see how it. I'm very optimistic because it's all this stuff is available.
It's at least available, and the human race is doing what the human race is supposed to be doing, and we have no ability to see exactly how things are going to work out in 200 years when people look back and go, oh, that phase, that stage, it'll have a name, there'll be a general understanding of what this whole phase was about. You called it, others have called it time of transition, and but we do at least have a sense of kind of what we've been discussing, really, tools that need to be invented or need to be pulled back out and used, lifestyles which are inherently unhealthy and lifestyles which are healthy. And the necessity for a spirituality that works for us with our current mindset. I know I personally, I mean, once you what a lot of people went through with this in the 60s, our parents went through, was sort of a red pilling that, you mean what's said in the Bible isn't actually, totally literally true, and you mean maybe there's some manipulation being going on here and stuff like that? Or I talked about the Reformation. I mean, that was an earlier red pill, and I think a lot of people who become atheists, a lot of people, agnostics, atheists, all kinds of modern people, they just can't go back to church again and start believing like they did when they were children, or like their parents or grandparents or great-grandparents believed. They just can't do that. And they might experiment with Buddhism or some other kind of pagan type of spirituality, and that may not be satisfying either. And it's like a lot of people have to sort of put together their own spirituality, and then they have to come up with some kind of framework that allows them, on one hand, to kind of fall into the mythology and fall into the spirit aspect of the practice, and then at the same time be able to hold the logical reality that, there's the logical mind is always saying in the background, well, Colin, that's all bullshit, and so that part is always there. And so we have to develop, personally, I think the integral system, the spiral dynamic system, which is inside the integral system, I think is a very good system to look at, to just understand there's all these different stages of psychosocial development, and each of these stages is its own way of looking at the world, and religion and spirituality is seen through a different lens at each of those. And here's the ones we've been through, and here's where we're at now, or what's coming up. And then you can kind of go, oh, okay, no wonder I can't gel with this, or I can't gel with that. And no wonder I have this sort of feeling that my spirituality is somewhere else. It's over here. You get to kind of have some kind of rough map for that. And then from there you can do what you want to do. But it's a very difficult time for modern or postmodern people when it comes to developing a spirituality that you can really embody.
Yeah, well said. Absolutely, it is. And I think it's good to understand that. And also as you were saying that, I was just reminded of how we all have the impulse to seek the mystery, to make sense of this grand design, even when we get discouraged by these dogmatic traditions that have become aberrant and make some of our people turn into an atheistic, materialistic literalism, in which, it's based on my lens, it's just a kind of a simplified version of reality that, you can just rely on the simplicity of the senses and what they present. And it's unfortunate that happens, but I also completely understand it. Mm-hmm. I've noticed that with some of the people that I've encountered that are very dogmatic atheists, and have that same orientation toward belief in a grand design, just averted to some other fictional entity,
Oh,
like,
it's
and without,
yeah.
without like criticizing any of these people. We
Mm-hmm.
all have elements of these things, and being a skeptic using logic is extremely important, and to actually align to what is true. But
Mm-hmm.
Rudolf Steiner with spiritual science, would vouch for that. Like,
Oh
you
yeah.
have to measure things in the spirit realms.
Yeah. Jung
But what I want,
said that all the time. Yeah.
yeah, and so a lot of people who get traumatized by just difficult religious upbringing,
Yeah.
I've known both people both in Christianity or Islam, then turn into militant atheism simply
Yeah.
because, and
It's a reaction. It's a reaction.
it's a it's a reaction. But what remains is the same psychology of their parents, which is dogmatism. It just goes the opposite way in rebellion. So the
Exactly.
same dogmatic irrationalism is just now veiled with supposed rationalism,
Yeah.
rationality, and so it's just a mess because the soul ultimately continues to suffer in some sort of purgatory.
And then also, hey, if you become a militant atheist or whatever, well, then that you can have that religious worldview, and then you don't have to eject yourself from the matrix. You can just stay,
Right.
you can keep working for Microsoft or Disney or whatever and drive a Tesla and all that and think about your 401k and blah, blah, blah. You don't have to leave the matrix. You don't have to, you can kind of be like, okay, no, I dumped that. I'm an atheist now. And here's all of the scientific rationale for why that other system was BS. And, here's super smart, brilliant MIT people telling me, this is the new way, or blah, 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 blah. And because when you throw all of that away and you go, okay, well, I don't know what my spirituality is, and I don't know the answers to these deep questions. And maybe I don't know what my highest purpose is. And maybe my highest purpose isn't compatible with this world. And maybe if I find out what it is, and I have to dump all of these ideologies and all these presuppositions, well, then maybe I'll be living in a tent under a bridge or something. And so, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna stick with it. And it's like but that's the thing. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. If you this is the whole thing of the idea of faith. And you go and what Christian, Islam, whatever it is, this whole idea of faith and developing faith and letting go of what your ego says is the right thing or the smart thing or the logical thing or whatever, and then just letting, quote unquote, God direct your life. Some people have an easier time doing that than others. And the people who have very busy ego minds, as the smart people, they have a very hard time with faith. And it's very hard. In the Jungian system, you would say that it's ego self axis, aligning your ego with your big S self, which is sort of the God image within. And it's easier said than done because the ego is totally autonomous and wants to do what it's Promethean, it's Luciferian, and it wants to do what it wants to do, and it wants to guide and drag you along for the whole thing. And so, going to this deeper, truly individualistic, individuated spirituality is an absolute hero's journey, and it ain't gonna be easy.
Yeah, and some people would say it's not even the way to go. Like Gurdjieff was like, you need a school to be disciplined to adhere to, and to be reminded to remember oneself. And I would say for most of us that is the case.
Yeah,
Some of us are
can't say that's wrong.
No, and some of us are autodidacts, and some of us can probably do it. But I do think a lineage is very important. But this is where we know that a lot of the lineages are corrupt. We know that churchianity, unfortunately, despite the beauty of much of Christian mysticism, that has always been persecuted. And so the esoteric strand of Christianity, again, Steiner has brought some of it, and there's a resurgence now of people bringing back or discovering really and rediscovering esoteric Christianity. And there's a wealth of wisdom there, lived wisdom, that is not jealously guarded or corrupted by just human beings who have lost their way. And so I think you said that so well, Colin. I think that's very important to remember everything that you said about one of the cop-outs. We all have cop-outs. We're all coping in various ways. And one of the copes with reality is atheism, because then you can truly be like, oh, great, this is all there is. My perception of reality is really the only perception of reality. No metaphysical messiness here. And yes, I can adopt all the items on the menu of Empire, pick one of them and go directly to the end. And like you said, unfortunately, you can't escape it. And, I'm going to say this. I'm sorry for anyone who may be on this path, but usually a materialistic dogmatic orientation toward reality does come with a number of pharmaceutical prescriptions in my experience from what I've seen. So that, it's not exclusive. That's just my observation.
Oh, to push back.
Well, it's SSRIs or in order to maintain the signal of Empire as the normal one, which is absolutely abnormal, one does need the help of the pharmaceutical arm of Empire to maintain that materialistic point of view. Because, of course, a lot of our brothers and sisters who are on this path, and they will not give any credence or reality to the fact that we're not just a bunch of chemical imbalanced humans. But we're actually a bunch of psychic forces that are combating within us. And if we don't have the skill capacity or initiatory pathway in our culture to deal with them, then, of course, they terrorize us, and they're extremely debilitating and horrible to deal with. And within that absence of any wisdom traditions, what can one person do but take pharmaceuticals to continue providing for their family or to continue making sense of reality? So it's actually a very sad state, but it is also a state that must be acknowledged. So
because if I didn't have just this sort of natural artist, outsider, cynic kind of viewpoint, I could see how easy it would be to just take the doctor's advice and take such and such prescription or whatever, and especially if it actually did something and if it actually worked. I don't even know if those things really work. Or if they're placebo. I don't know. I've never taken them and won't. I guess some of them probably do, but the whole thing's falling apart now, obviously, and that's what your film is about. And the whole thing's falling apart and can't possibly go on. The whole. Again, back to the Reformation. I mean, we have to admit that the modern human of today is in some ways, lost spiritually, but in other ways has a lot more opportunities, quote unquote, than people in medieval feudal times. Basically, sharecroppers or whatever, and that these we do go through these civilizational reformations, and it does appear that the individual is developing and that we are evolving, and that there is this sort of shedding of empire that happens, and then it kind of just comes back again anew in a fresh way, a new fresh challenge. But there are but that we do that progress and evolution is real. I mean, don't you agree that human beings have evolved?
I would subscribe to that notion. I haven't tracked it because of my limited experience and of my lifetime here. But from what I see, I'm just trying to be very accurate here with what I'm saying. Like, it seems that way. I just can't really vouch for it because I've only lived here for a number of decades.
All we can vouch for is our own experience and perception. So maybe not. I mean, it seems like technologically we've evolved, right?
Well, here I'll share a few things on that. So you and Melissa had in Shadow Tech, your book,
Hmm.
you wrote about the holons, right? Of just development in
Ken
various
Wilber,
holons.
yeah. Arthur Kessler, yeah,
Is that from Integral? Okay, yeah.
yeah. He
So
borrowed it, but yeah.
okay, and so based on that, we all need structures. This came to me in a much more lucid and comprehensive way during COVID. I started seeing that many of us, all of us, are basically beholden to different structures and systems of thought and being, organizational structures in which we make sense of reality.
Right.
Of course, in this the descent from the oneness of God, of
Hmm.
being, down
Hmm.
into the various realms, into
Hmm.
this manifest existence,
Hmm.
we are under all these rules and laws. And the farther away we fall from the monad, the more rules and laws we are under. So that's just a
Hmm.
fact. Now,
Hmm.
we can start, the more conscious we become, we gain the choice and the agency to choose more or less which systems and which structures we are under. So what I mean by that is the mainstream structure of war is peace, like wokeism or whatever it is, all the current things right now, right?
Yes.
There are ways that organize reality and frame reality.
Hmm.
Or let's say, let me just move into the COVID narrative is probably very
Ideologies, right?
emblematic.
Civilizational ideologies, worldviews, frameworks,
Yeah,
narratives, civilizational narratives. Yeah.
yeah, they give us definitions and organize the dynamics between different players and different events in the world so that we can make sense of it.
And
To
they
do it
define our civilization's trajectory as a whole.
exactly, so the
Yep.
group goal, and
Hmm.
those are all just assumed as truths, as self-evident
Yes.
realities. We sometimes don't even know they exist. We
And
just function
every
based on their
civilization
momentum.
has these different structural boundaries, morals, and beliefs and belief systems of all kind that sort of
Yeah,
imply reality for us. This is our programming, right?
yeah, and even in manifestations of our tribal heritage, we
Yeah.
also have that. We have the myth making, making sense of reality. But the thing is, as long it doesn't matter what the symbols really are, as long as the dynamics between the forces and their qualities are accurately mapped out. Doesn't matter if you call something, if you have
Yeah. Does
the
it
Greek
work?
pantheon of gods. Exactly. Does
Does it
it
work
work?
for
Do
you?
those Exactly. So those symbols are replaceable. There's different kind of stories, but ultimately, yes, does it work and is it aligned to universal truths? And we can judge that by the fruits of our civilization
Right.
and of our fulfillment as human beings.
Right. We're all living in
So
some kind of a projected shared mythology. And
yeah,
but if it works for us and we all generally feel healthy and you look and we're not all, and we're generally healthy and then, okay, it's working, fine, go with it. It's all we
yeah,
have.
exactly,
It's all we have.
precisely. And so now we have a very curated and a very heavily curated basically structure of reality, which is being imposed on a lot of people. And through technocracy and a lot of physical governance, the means of controlling physical sustenance, with the advent of CBDCs, the desire to control resources, agriculture, travel, movement, thought, emotion,
Yes.
and through the biometric system and potentially implants and
Right.
other shenanigans of these kind of
Just a
lower life
new
forms.
flavor of the same old stuff, right?
Yeah, there's a greater exertion of force to go down one pathway of defining reality.
Hmm.
So this is where the whole red pill, as you call it, the red pill movement, to be differentiated from, I think, what's been popularized by the men's rights movement, but just the red pill matrix movement.
Yeah, that
Uh,
didn't really fully take off, thankfully. So we just go right back to the metaphor of the Matrix. So, yes, exactly.
yeah, back to the matrix.
Yeah.
And so many. This is the thing, though. So many of us, again, including myself, we need structures to function and understand reality. But the more we evolve, the more that our consciousness expands, the more capable we are of not outsourcing but resourcing our own framework of reality. And so right now, because of the collapse, the general collapse of meaning, the general collapse of trusted sources of authority, which have betrayed the people, and that's becoming more apparent to many other humans, we are left bereft and somewhat incapable of forming our own sense of reality. We have the world's tradition, like we mentioned earlier, available for all of us, but we don't fully know what to make of all of these. So also with the advent of deep fakes and a lot of the AI hyper reality, which is just another extra matrix on top of the matrix, it is becoming quite interesting and difficult. But this is where the true heroic impulse, which I'm very excited about, comes in with the human being, in which we really have to embody the present moment, embody our own authority, have deep humility, and then curiosity, and also to allow ourselves, based on our inherent sense of self-worth, to choose reality and be open to it, to keep adjusting it as evidence inspires us. So we're in this space where we have been booted out of the house. In fact, we kind of, like, some of us are running away out of the house of very malicious parents, right? Because those industries, those infrastructures, those institutions are so damaging right now, with everyone who is sleepwalking within their bureaucracies and enacting them, that we have no choice. Well, we have two choices. We are either subsumed by them and sucked into their timeline of, some sort of like inhuman subservience, or we do the hard work and we basically start doing things on our own. We start paying our own rent. We find our own part-time job. When I'm here, I'm just the allegory is like the teenager leaving home,
right?
And it's not easy, but if we literally, that's the only option right now, is to figure out new ways based on an actual harmonized way of doing these things. So we have to rediscover everything. We have to rediscover medicine. We have to rediscover finance. We have to rediscover all these elements, because the other side is just collapsing more and more and more into a constrictive framework of magnetized into deep collapse into the satanic Aramanic world of deep control and form. And some souls may want to go and live within that for their purposes. And many of us are like, no, let us, through this tension, rise, harmonize at a higher level.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. The abusive, or the parent becomes a parasite, and then you have to relieve yourself. You have to remove yourself from that situation. One of the things that came to my mind when you were talking about that is that, one is absolutely what you're saying. We have to actually reevaluate all of these different pillars of civilization and go, okay, well, basically retool the matrix, because the matrix is also, it's not just a metaphor for parasitic civilization. It's also just a metaphor for the ego and the material world in general that's always there. But it occurred to me that if you say, okay, well, I'm going to focus on, well, we're going to use local currencies, and we're going to use, some digital kind of currencies, and then we're going to go back to local government, and we're going to change our transportation, where you start retooling the whole thing, then, and you put all your focus on that, and you say, well, we're going to, kind of like what the communists always said, this structure is broken. We're going to invent a new structure, and it's going to be a utopia for all of us, and it never works. Well, we might be more mature enough not to, try that formula again. But what occurs to somebody like me, and probably to you, who recognizes that all of this, you can't just retool the society and just have a vision for a more symbiotic society, while at the same time, there's all this free-floating shadow material that you have inherited and has grown up within you, and as a response to the trauma of civilization and of your ancestors and all of this. And you can't just go build a new society for yourself and plop yourself into this new society. You're just going to dump all of the shadow crap that you've brought with you. It's like saying, the world is sick, and so I'm going to go, quarantine myself from the world, and then we're going to go over and live over there. But then everybody brings the disease with them, and so so that's not going to work. And so basically, what has to happen is the people who are conscious enough to say we need to retool things and do things in a more symbiotic way at the material level, at the civilizational level. We also have to now develop some psycho-spiritual modality for actually healing ourselves and for not passing all that garbage on to our children, and for making, we're not ready actually yet to put the goal of humanity at, going to the moon or defeating the globalists or whatever. We have to go through this interim stage of healing ourselves. And that sort of has to be the goal for now, and understanding all of the personal and collective pain body, and then developing modalities for healing ourselves of this, because this is an interrelational psychic virus or disease that we all have, and we've got to work at that level of things to, probably at the same time as that we're saying, okay, well, we don't want to go into their CBDs, and we don't want this, and we don't want that. We want a better system. And if you go back to Ken Wilber again, back to Integral, I'm using this in my new book. He has a 4-quadrant model where he says, hey, look, everything that you want to look at in reality and you want to understand, there's 4 main perspectives that you can look at it through. You have the personal perspective of personal, the mind and everything that's appearing in the subjective mind. And then you have the cultural, which is the shared informational. We've been talking about narratives and civilizational constructs and all of that. You have that. You have the body itself and how the body encodes and embeds all of this. And then you have the actual collective structure of the society that everybody builds together. And you can't just focus on one of those things and say, let's build a new society or let's create a healthier culture, and then not look at how it's all into this garbage has been integrated into your body or how it's been integrated into your mind. You have to holistically go through all of these quadrants, and you have to develop modalities to deal with all of these things. And so this isn't just a task of physical structuring and retooling, which the Western mind is very good at. We're very good at making stuff and figuring out, mechanical ways of making stuff work, but we're not very good at introspection and healing and all that interpersonal, emotional intelligence type stuff. We're not as good as that. Well, the East has much more of that than we do. And so we got this is what I'm always, the last thing I'm saying, this is what I'm always trying to say, is I'm saying, hey, look, you gotta look, this is what Jung is talking about when he talks about the shadow and stuff. This is all that you call this the collective shadow. This is all the dark side. This is all the atrocities and political garbage that you're creating out here, so-called evil in the world. Well, there's a correlate to that in yourself. It's in this domain that he called the shadow, and you better start working on that, because otherwise you're just going to recreate all this same garbage over and over again because it's inside of you.
Yep, totally, absolutely agree with that. That's why I think this process, if we are going into some greater awakening or just some sort of restructuring of society according to more harmonious laws, it's going to take time. It's going to take a bunch of time, because there's so much collective and personal shadow that still needs to come through, to be resolved, to be processed, to be refined. That is a long process, and that is why we have these totalitarian structures mirroring a lot of stuff for us, creating unnecessary pressure, and also mirroring the ways that we have fully disowned certain choice-making capacities. AI now is starting to mirror our own inner mechanization. Reality is basically telling us a lot of what is not harmonious, and it is creating it. They're evolutionary prompts. So yeah, absolutely, all these things need to be cleared as we move forward.
Now, okay, if I need to, I need to create a space in order to be able to work on myself. And I need to be able to have enough room. I can't have this, be darting around in traffic and commuting and all of this and all this matrix stuff if I'm going to heal myself, if I'm going to work on myself. And then if I start taking that seriously and doing that, then I'm not really going to be able to have very deep relationships with other people who are not doing that. And so then I have that problem. And then I need to pay some kind of bills because I have to have some kind of roof over my head. And the cost of living in this civilization is so high right now. So so this is where you might think, oh, okay, well, let's start intentional communities where people of like mind can, share resources and make it less expensive and more doable for people. And I think that kind of has to happen. But then each of those intentional communities will sort of become its own little petri dish, and to discover how successful people can be living with each other, working with each other, and then expanding out. And people tried those in the 60s, and most of those communes blew up. And so I think this is, again, back to what I'm doing. I'm trying to say, hey, this is my main thing is, hey, everybody that's been if you're not red-pilled, if you're not even really grasping all the civilizational darkness, I can't even talk to you. But if you are already gone through that initiation and you're like, okay, damn, what am I going to do about this? What does this mean for my life, for my children, for where I'm living? Then I can talk to you and say, okay, well, there's a personal inner correlate to all of this darkness out there. And now you have to start working on it. And then you can start talking with other people who are working on it. And then we can kind of go from there. So that's just kind of his... I don't see any way out of doing that other than just, clean sweep, just, nuke the whole thing, have a great flood or whatever, or a meteor, and then everybody can just kind of start from scratch. And I think that's probably what's happened a number of times.
Mm-hmm. Who knows? We may be close to that, but I hope not, because I think this can still be a very interesting ride, even if it turns dark. But that's not entirely true.
Oh. Yeah. No, go ahead. And then I was just going to say, let me put my glasses on and see how long we've been talking for an hour and 11 minutes. And I could talk to you for hours, and maybe we could, go for another 20 minutes or something, but say what you were going to say. And then maybe we can go into the personal, kind of take it into our own personal lives. Maybe.
Let's do that.
What were you going to say though?
I was just going to riff on some of what you said, but I think I lost the thread. It wasn't important enough. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I did that earlier too. All right. Well, for example, so this morning I got up and I knew I had this interview with you, and I was just going to make breakfast or whatever. And right when we're waking up, me and Melissa, we get up out of bed about the same time, and she drops a large glass onto the bricks around the fireplace in this house, and just boom, just shatters this glass, and it just goes everywhere. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't have a whole lot of time. I got to do my morning thing, and then now I have to clean up this glass, which is all over the place. And so it's the perfect kind of trigger. And I had myself broke a glass just a week earlier in the kitchen, and then spent like an hour, sweeping up all these tiny little pieces from all over the place. And I'm like, okay, well, it's the perfect trigger for our relational pain body to get activated. And so, my reaction is this, oh, Christ, okay, get away from it. I'll clean it up. Just get away. I'll clean it because I'm a really good cleaner, and I know I can clean it up really good. Okay, no problem. Just get away. And then but then no, it devolved into an argument. Oh, well, whose fault it was or whatever it was, and all of that, and how that works. And then the way that we've been working on ourselves and together for over a decade and stuff, and so we don't let this go on for that long. But that doesn't mean that we still are not reactive and still don't have some kind of relational pain body that has its own particular reactive points. And so after 20 minutes, I sat down and I'm like, okay, well, what is the scripting behind this conflict? And so I'm like, okay, because what emerged through that thing was, I don't want to pull it up here because I don't want to disturb the screen here, but what came up out of that conflict was an old system. This is an old system of ours that has to do with our relationship, and everybody else's relationship is going to have a little bit different narrative scripting behind it, and it comes from early family stuff. And so, whatever was going on in the family dynamic when I was a child, my mother being discombobulated and chaotic in the household, and me being ultra sensitive, and then basically developing this reactivity to this chaotic household. That's kind of part of my pain body. And then Melissa having this dad who used to, come home and yell at mom, and then she would have to protect her mom. And then ultimately she ran away from home, as a 15-year-old and all of this. That scripting is still there. That's in the pain body, or in IFS. Those are parts that are still active. And so what you have in these situations is, this is an autonomous relational conflict. It's an autonomous complex within myself that is a traumatized part from growing up the way I grew up, and there's a particular wound in me, and then she has a particular wound in her, and then we get together, and then those two complexes get to have a relationship for themselves. So there's me and Melissa's ego relationship, and then there's the relationship that different lower unconscious levels of ourselves have, and some of those lower levels are these autonomous complexes that actually thrive on recreating the feelings and the states of consciousness that emerged when those complexes were originally created at childhood. So even though it's like the battered woman complex, where, even though it's obvious that the husband is hurting her and she's devolving through this relationship, she won't press charges against him. She won't run away from him, because there's a part of her psyche, both of their psyche, that's addicted to the conflict. So this is, Eckhart Tolle calls this the pain body, and this kind of traumatized reactivity, this sort of psychic, parasitic, autonomous operation that's going on in individuals, and this is ubiquitous throughout our civilization, and everybody kind of has their own kind of version of it, and it all kind of stacks together to become this ecosystem of active shadow garbage, reactive, active shadow stuff. And this is you getting. I've been working on this for 10 years, and I've been focused on this as a big part of my life, and this is still going on. And so, every year or two, I bring in some new kind of understanding to help me understand it, or some new kind of practice, like a meditation practice, or maybe microdosing on psilocybin, or IFS to help name these reactive parts and understand them and communicate with them or whatever it is. And I keep moving, and I am definitely better. I am definitely more healed. I'm definitely more mature. But at the same time, I see how difficult this kind of work is. And, this is living throughout. It's like when you watch Alex Jones or whatever, and he shows you all of the corruption in the society. That's inside the psyches of all of us. And we're addicted, or these complexes are addicted to this kind of self-destructive reactivity and all the chemicals and all of that. And so, man, this is huge. This is a huge elephant in the living room, and it's not just a theoretical thing, but this is a personal thing that we have to deal with in our personal lives. And I can actually envision. I don't even know if you can get through this in one generation. I don't even know if it's probably going to take several generations of very awake and aware people who consciously curate their lives and their environment and consciously work on themselves and try to heal themselves, and then several generations to heal ourselves and to become aware of how this is all working. But this is just, you see what I'm saying, the point I'm trying to make of how huge this deal is. And even when there's people like me who are saying, oh, hey, here it is, here's the shadow garbage, and here it is in a personal life, and I'm willing to look at it, and I'm willing to talk about it in public and all of that, I still can't say I fully know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That is so, and yet I'm inspired to, with the listeners who are still with us, to say that also there's an aspirational, inspiring view within all this. And while everything you said is true, and I am on that path as well, see it, clearing it, getting better, and being humbled all the time by life and by my own inner world. At the same time, the creative impulse, that which really creates, is not circumstantial, it happens in this very moment. So a lot of those moments of the heroic impulse to clarity, to an act of charity, or of courage, all those elements are also available at all times as well, to give us those sparks that are much more closely connected in some sort of open portal to a greater transcending core of some sort. So just to kind of to infuse some of that inspiration in this, because you painted a accurate and potentially a dreadful picture for some people who may be earlier on the path of their self-worth.
I was blackpilling people. Oh, okay, right.
I don't think you were certainly, you and I were seeing eye to eye, but to some people maybe. So I'm just careful and cautious here to bring, especially in this time of what may feel like darkness to some. I just want to say,
come join our army and die.
And toil for decades, and it's slow work, and it is, and also, but at the same time, sometimes we have leaps and other things, and like, I just want to say, I think there's the
100th monkey, right there. You go.
The morphogenetic field. By the way, I'm not throwing any accusations that you're blackpilling. I had that impulse.
No, it's all good.
But you're right, the morphogenetic field, the more that we do this, the easier it is for everyone else. And perhaps this is a romanticized view, but perhaps we are offloading some of the overall sewage through our own little individual taps, drop by drop.
Dude, so. I think this is actually happening, and I don't know how it's working or to what degree, but my subjective movie of life is showing me that what I'm doing in my own petri dish is actually that the architect is using this information of what I'm figuring out in my own laboratory for the rest of the simulation.
And you're seeing it reflected back at you through other people's insights and revelations?
Yeah, it's through synchronicities, and it's uncanny. And I'm seeing that when I make realizations which are advanced, just little clicks, little wow, okay, something clicked, and I'm getting the way all of this works more. Then all of a sudden I'll hear some guest on a radio program or something that will say the exact same thing, and I never heard it before, and I'm like, oh wow, they're having the same. It's spreading.
Okay. I want to piggyback on that. I've been seeing the same thing
Yeah.
specifically in the last 5 years.
I mean, it could be confirmation bias, is what they or whatever. But go ahead.
I don't know. I would agree with you, and I've also felt like different egoic parts in me have been like, oh shit, they're literally framing things exactly the same way I am, and I haven't even said this publicly yet, and I wanna have some credit for this insight, and it's silly,
yeah, right.
But basically,
right.
that's the shadow aspect. Another
Right.
aspect of it is like, oh shit, this is moving through the field, meaning confirmation. We have confirmation here, and it's happening quite quickly. Yeah, so this is exciting. Yeah,
it is, and so, but this is a very advanced way of getting meaning and getting a feeling of purpose, and that what you're doing is working and stuff. That they say, what is this? People, to be able to create great things requires you to be able to. I'm trying to think of the term. Put away your quick satisfaction, and that's not the right term. In exchange for a delayed satisfaction, right?
Instant gratification versus
delayed gratification versus thank you. And so doing this kind of work, what we're talking about is like when you're doing this kind of work and saying, all right, well, I admit that it might not even be fruitful for several generations. That's a very delayed gratification. And so it can, and so when you can actually, so when the simulation, the construct shows you back, oh, no, it's actually instant. It's a delay for it to actually, go out throughout the entire human population or the whole civilization, but it's actually being used immediately. Mm-hmm. Immediately, it's starting to go out there and pepper out in there. It is. And so...
Yeah, it is. I have the impulse to say another thing is that as we go on that healing journey of purification and just reconstructing our inner world, at first we over-index on the pain body, the wounding, doing all the archaeological digging.
Yes.
Of course, there's blame and other things that we have to go through before we let that go. But at one point, we have to make the decision to start being more active in terms of generative. What that means is start over-indexing and investing a lot more energy into the self, as IFS would call it, or into the going deeper into that I am presence, right? So that I don't like using the term witness, but because it's so dry and boring.
I call it the watcher.
The watcher, sure. I really do love the I am essence, and this goes more into Ramana Maharshi's teachings and others, and really the true Christic teachings, right?
Yeah.
But at any point that is available to us as this being grounded on a piece of land instead of moored in the water, the tumultuous unconscious. So at one point we have to start taking it upon ourselves to feel the worth and courage to be stepping more and more in that space so that all these other parts can be magnetized and integrated. And that is our pure presence. And that's not just a refuge. Initially it is, but it starts becoming that is basically ultimately the state we're working towards. So if we're not practicing it, it is not getting the reps in it, right? So that's why I've gone through this too, and to some degrees I'm still doing it in this perpetual wound picking. You see some of the old hippies who are still doing that and going on medicine journeys in the jungle for like decades and decades, and it's like you're fixated on the dark world, and cool, that's it, but like you're not partaking in the beauty of really using your will to ground yourself here now, and the storm of the other selves to be disciplined in with this. For myself, for the paternal figure being like, yes, my dears, and here you can be safe, and I'm going to hold your expression and your tantrums, but there is one who is growing in strength and in holding in care and love, but also in discipline and devotion. So just wanted to to say that.
Yeah. I'm with you on that, and with the coming back to the now and the pure presence. And I just found Melissa and I found this guy named Shinzen Young, Shinzen. It's like a Japanese Zen title. Young, Young. He's an American academic and meditation teacher and scholar of Eastern spiritual traditions and languages. And he's basically taken it upon himself to study all the Eastern traditions of meditation, mindfulness, and all of that, and then to reinterpret the language back into modern English and sort of come up with a map of the various different types of meditation or schools of enlightenment through the Eastern world, and then say, okay, well, there's this type, and then you can do this kind of practice, and then there's this type, and you can do this kind of practice, and there's this, and here's the steps to that, and really kind of give you a blueprint so that different people with different orientations or personality types can find something that works for them, and it all goes back to the same place. And so I've been going through his YouTube videos. There's a big beginners, I think it's called Shinzen videos on YouTube. And there's one that I was watching called playlist for beginners or whatever. And I'm just sort of going through this. And I think this is a goldmine with what this guy has here, because when you start to go into the, if you don't grow up in some kind of a tradition that gives you a practice, a meditation, and this type of spiritual practice, good luck. You're going to try this, you're going to try this, you're going to go Zen, you're going to go with the Indians, you're going to go with the Tibetans, you're going to try that, whatever, some other Western guys, mishmash of stuff. And this kind of gives you a full blueprint for what's out there and what things you can do. And then you're kind of like, okay, this is working for me, I'm going to stay with this. And, but that if you are sort of a intellectual and you're addicted to all the serotonin and whatever chemicals of thinking and analyzing and figuring out, meditation is going to be very hard for you, or it can be until you train yourself. So finding the right thing, but I think you're dead on with this, and that is we can't just we have to have some kind of interpersonal mind-body equilibrium kind of peace practice that recalibrates our nervous system and brings us back into mind-body coherence. And we have to do that. This is the East meets West kind of spirituality. I think it's obvious, and we're also anxious and just addicted to our own endogenous chemicals. That I think we absolutely have to do this, and so yeah, that's what I was going to say on that.
It's just as a side note to name drop, I did meditate with Shinzen Young in 2017 in Toronto. He passed through town. Not that I had a personal meditation, but we were just in the same space.
Okay, cool. Great. You already knew about him.
His frameworks. Yeah, his framework is great. Yeah, but yes, we are really, the goal here is to embody the logos, right? To be fully in this space, in this present moment now, to be as awake and as lucid of our awareness as a divine spark of creation literally manifesting as we exist and witness it here. So that's my metric of where I am. My goal is to be in that space, and whatever else comes to obfuscate that, to pull me back into the fallen world or the matrix, to sever me and tether me into all these aspects of my ancestral and personal formational lineage and all these magnetizing things that are just salacious, whether they're intellectual or emotional or somatic. My job is to remember as much as I can that state, to refine it more and more, And that being in that state brings up all these things, and sometimes we can get lost in them for months or years and come back to that state, right? But for me, it's like that is the thing. Everything else, I'm not going to go hunting for it. It will make itself apparent as an obstruction to being in the clarity
Oh.
and to the in the stream of equilibrium. So I don't need to go hunt it down, because if I hunt it down, I may get lost in the woods and the forest.
Oh.
Um,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's
No,
just been my
it's,
approach lately.
yeah. Well, I can certainly, the way I've been approaching it is, yeah, go hunt it down and basically just become aware of how everything that is in the shadow that needs to be looked at is already kind of poking out as a weed. And then, so once you just become aware of, that's going on, somebody takes you out to your own, backyard and says, hey, that's a weed, that's a weed, that's a weed. Those are good plants. Those are weeds. Pull those. Well, then you can start doing that work. And so that's, it's kind of an active process. And this is a well-known problem in alchemy, is that you can get stuck in the negrito, what they used to call melancholia, and you can get, and it doesn't have to be just like a depressive state, like melancholia suggests, but it can be a state of anger, a state of aggression, of wanting to fight back against what you're finding, and all of that, but it can be any kind of addictive, internally negative, reactive state that your initiation then led you into this. And it was like in the Matrix, where like, okay, Neo, so you're awake, and then here's your life now. That you live underground and you eat this slop or whatever, and then there's this war with the machines, and you're gonna have to put your life at risk and all of this, and now you're gonna lead this hero's journey and all of this, and there you go. That's your life. You wanted the truth. Okay, here you go. Life sucks, and that kind of. And then Cypher was the character in the movie that kind of embodied that and said, well, I don't want that. I'd rather live in a fake world than to live in this world where maybe I'm seeing the truth, but I'm actually seeing that the world is actually very, very dark and disturbing, and now I have to deal with that. That's a black pilling, and all the alchemists always talked about that and knew that. And it can't, people who have fragile egos or who aren't predisposed to this kind of work, they can't do that, and it's probably better for them to just find some practice, like you were saying earlier, some kind of tradition, and just do this kind of meditation and focus on this stuff and curate your environment carefully to keep yourself from falling apart. But there have to be some kind of people, especially right now, to go down into the shadow of their own consciousness and of the civilization. And you and I happen to be in this group, and go, okay, well, this is what's in there. And so when people say, well, this is what's coming up for me, we're like, okay, yeah, that's well known. That's what this is. And perhaps that's where this came from. And this is how you can kind of trace that back down and what you can do about it. Somebody has to be the kind of explorers of this and investigate what's down in this cave, and demystify it and bring it up and say, okay, here's what's down here, so that other people can go and work with it and not be so, not so that people can successfully traverse this dimension. Don't you think?
Absolutely.
Don't you think somebody's got to do this, right?
Someone's got to do it, and to model it for others. And just the way that I constantly benefit from the books and others' wisdom on this matter, for sure. It's a ladder of ascent. All of us benefit from those who are above us on the ladder, and we also pass on whatever moves through us to those who are just below us on the ladder. Some of us may pass, some of them may pass us, others may fall down, but we're all moving up. So
Yeah.
that's how I see it. Yeah.
Yep, me too. Okay, well, is there anything else we should talk about before we go? Did you have you were going to say something about AI? How much more time do you have? I go as long as you like. There's no time limit on this show. We've been talking for an hour and 38 minutes.
I think
I did take a note.
I could keep.
You did.
I can
you
go
had mentioned AI. I think you had mentioned something about it, but whatever you want to say.
I did, yeah. I think a number of more minutes before we close. I'm feeling a little spent, and here the sun is going down, and I actually would like to go out in the sun for a bit.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, I think we're at a good time to kind of wind down. Yeah. But
Okay.
go ahead. Oh, okay.
Great.
Oh, that's it. Okay, great. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, wonderful. Well, as you know, we talk on the phone from time to time, and I'm really glad that we did this video interview. And you're welcome if you to do another one with me. And I'm hoping that this program can kind of get out of the weeds and get some traction and get more views. So hopefully folks that watch this can help us with that. And when your next piece, when Kingdom comes out, you'll probably do some interviews around that. So maybe we'll do something. And if anything comes to mind from our conversation that's sort of practical on the practical side of things, shoot it over to me. I've got my own book, a short book that's coming out now, and it's very difficult to it's very difficult to put all this stuff into words and then to be able to it's like I'm going to put this thing out, and then I'm already I almost want to say the disclaimer that everything I say in here is only half the picture or a tiny slice of the picture, and I'll have to keep on knocking at it. But okay, great. So I will put the links to everybody to In Shadow and anything else you send me in the description. And I hope you get your new website going so folks can go over there. Do we have any kind of a website we can point people to right now?
At the moment, we do not, but in a couple of weeks, my LubomirArsov.com will be up.
Oh, great.
And yeah. And we're looking at releasing Kingdom within the next month or so.
Oh, fantastic.
So, yeah.
Great.
So, yeah, perhaps we can speak again then. It would be my pleasure. Okay,
fantastic. Thank you so much, Lubomir. Okay, hang out just for a second, and I'll end the recording, and we will see you all later. ShadowTechAlchemy.com is my website. Okay, bye for now.